Hi everyone, I'm Rhea Favole and I'm the principal lawyer and CEO of Solve Immigration, an Australian immigration law firm. And I want to welcome you to the very first episode of Mind the Gap Australia. I really appreciate you joining us. This podcast is specifically designed for employers and recruiters who need some clarity around what's actually happening in the labour market right now and how sponsorship could actually be a practical tool to build proper workforce strategy. It's not something that you tack on at the last minute when you're desperate. Definitely something that you need to think about early so that you have options available. As a business owner myself, I do speak with other business owners a lot and recruiters as well. And I do tend to hear the same things again and again. People simply can't attract and retain the right people. They're putting up job ads, they're speaking to agencies, they're shuffling rosters, they're trying sign-on bonuses, but still they can't get the right people. When I start talking about sponsorship as part of the solution, I hear the same kind of responses from employers. It's often things like, oh, we're not looking at that yet, or we'll let you know if we get to that particular point. Or sometimes, I know some migrants that I could refer to you. All of these responses usually mean a few things. Either they're not really interested because they don't actually understand how it works, or they think that the time to talk to a lawyer is when they suddenly realize they urgently need to sponsor someone, which is usually when it's too late because they haven't actually assessed the person to see if they could be sponsored in the first place. And when someone wants to refer migrants to us individually, that tells me there's another knowledge gap. The migrants often need the sponsorship by the business, so it's not helpful for them to come and see us on their own if there's no business actually willing to sponsor them and the business hasn't been assessed as a viable sponsor. They can't just stick a visa application in without proper sponsorship in the first place. From recruiters, I hear another version of the same thing. Oh, we only want candidates who already have work rights, or our clients are only prepared to look at the candidates who already have work rights. What that actually usually means is they haven't dealt with sponsorship before, or they don't feel informed enough to be able to explain to their clients that sponsorship may be the only viable way that they need to attract and retain candidates, and it's actually going to expand the talent pool. So in this episode, I want to start by resetting that understanding because the right talent is out there. There are good, experienced, committed people who could be a long-term part of your business. But if you're only looking at the people who already hold a visa or only hiring based on who happened to be on a visa with work rights in Australia at the time, you could very well be cutting off your nose to spite your face without realizing it. Now, we're going to cover off 3 topics today. So before we delve into some more detail, what these topics are going to be. Firstly, why so many employers are feeling worn down by the effort it takes to attract and retain good people, and why that isn't necessarily a problem with your business or how the labour market migration settings actually work. Second, why limiting yourself to candidates who already have work rights or who happen to be on a working holiday or other temporary visa is a risky way to plan your workforce, and how your thinking is clashing with the Australian skilled migration system, how it's set up. Third, where the real talent pool sits, so including people who can't just arrive on a working holiday and how sponsorship allows them to access skilled migration and become part of your long-term stable members. When I talk to employers, what I'm hearing isn't just that they're tired of recruitment. It's that they're exhausted from trying to attract and retain good people. They finally get someone into the role and then that person leaves. Or they do a big recruitment push and the candidates just aren't at the level that they actually needed. Or they're overly reliant on people who are here on temporary visas who can't or don't want to stay in the long term. And often what sits behind that is actually a misunderstanding of how the migration system actually works. There's a tendency to focus heavily on working holiday makers and other short-term visa holders. And many of them are wonderful people and they can absolutely be valuable to your business in the short term, but you need to actually understand the demographics and the visa settings to see whether or not they're a long-term solution. Some of those people may not be available for that long-term sponsorship. That's the reality. Or they may not want it. Their visas may not be designed to lead to a long-term pathway with you. So if you want to build your workforce and plan, hoping the people will just be able to stay, this isn't really a strategy. And that's not what the migration program was designed to do. At the same time, there are people with passports from countries that don't actually have access to these working holiday arrangements at all. They don't have that option. So you're not going to get to see them here. You don't kind of get to try before you buy in Australia when it comes to sponsorship more often than not. They're extremely talented, extremely motivated and skilled individuals, but they need a sponsorship in place to be able to come here and be committed to your organization in the long term. This is why it's really important that you need to align your thinking with how the system is actually designed. Australia's skilled and sponsorship framework is not built on the try before you buy, like I was just mentioning. That kind of approach where someone comes in casually, maybe later get sponsored. Now that works for local hires, people who are already Australian citizens and permanent residents. But if you've got a skill shortage, it's not going to work. So you need to think a little more strategically. If you're looking at temporary sponsorship, generally that's going to be a minimum of 2 years. So even if you say we only want candidates who already have a visa, what you're actually doing is not prioritizing the right skills. You're being short-term in your thinking. Now, I know that is probably not your intention. You're just thinking about dollars and cents, but that's not how it actually plays out. So what I want you to do is have an epiphany. I want you, as we go through this episode, to start thinking, have I actually been looking just at work rights and I'm putting that as a filter? Am I actually looking at someone just based on the skills and talents that they can bring? The visa status is kind of blocking that. So the way to approach workforce planning is the whole system needs to be designed to help you bring in the skills that you need. Once you understand that, the conversation is about where the talent is, and then it shifts quite dramatically. Let's start with what's sitting in front of you day to day. You're trying to recruit, you're trying to keep your good people, and it feels like you're constantly on the back foot. Roles sit vacant for longer than they used to. You lose staff to burnout, other employers or different industries altogether. You finally get someone in a role and then they move, or when they've just become useful, it doesn't work out for them to be able to stay. It's normal to assume that this is a reflection on your business. It may be that you need to offer more money, flexibility, more perks, and yes, those things can help, but they don't actually change the underlying reality. In many occupations, there simply isn't enough of that talent and skill in Australia to meet the demand. And that's why some occupations are eligible for visa sponsorship. Not all occupations are. The government actually looks at labour market data. They're looking at tax records, employment statistics, vacancy data, regional patterns, and it actually identifies which specific skills are in shortage. Those occupations then get added to different skilled migration lists that can be sponsored. So if you are struggling to attract and retain people in a role, and it's on that list, it's a sign that you're not a bad employer, but that you're operating in a labour market that's already recognised as having a shortage. Knowing that doesn't magically fix your staffing problem, but it does help you to see that you can't just continue to rely on the same local recruitment and I'll wait till they've got work rights type approach. You need to start working with the levers that are in place, and then you can expect a different result. Now, let's talk about one of the most common filters that I hear from employers and recruiters. We only want candidates who already have work rights. Well, on the surface, it sounds practical, right? You don't want to deal with the complexity. You don't want to have to deal with visas. You just want someone that you can put on your roster as soon as possible. But here's the problem. When you limit yourself to candidates who already have work rights, you're not actually selecting for skill, experience, or commitment. You are selecting simply for the fact that they've got the rights and you think it sounds like they might be aligned, you can pop them in quickly. They just happen to have this visa. Often the reasons have nothing to do with your sector or your business. So on top of that, many of these visa types, like a working holiday visa or some student visas, are not designed for long-term employment with one employer. They often have restrictions on potentially, it could be hours, it could be durations, it could be on the type of work that they can do. They can be fantastic visas for certain types of work arrangements, but they're not the backbone of long-term workforce strategy. If you're trying to build a stable team and all your energy is going into people who by definition are on a temporary or transitional visa, then you are planning your workforce around something that is short-term by design. And while you're doing that, you're overlooking the entire segment of potential staff here. You're completely overlooking them. But the people who are overseas or have come to Australia but do not yet hold the right visa, who are highly skilled, who would be very happy to commit to you for the long term if sponsorship was on the table. And that's how the program was actually designed. This is where the system comes in. Skilled migration is not set up for casual, we'll see how we'll go, we'll try it out type model. Even the temporary sponsorship pathways, as I was saying earlier, needs a minimum commitment of 2 years. So if your mindset is, we'll only look at already has a visa sorted, you're actually shrinking the talent pool that is available to you. And if that occupation is on that skilled list, you're going to continue having the exact same hiring blocks unless you start looking to bring in skills that you can sponsor a commitment to your business. It's not just simplification. You're looking at self-sabotage if you really don't examine this without realizing how it's actually going to impact your overall workforce strategy. Now let's turn to where the talent actually is. There are people overseas, and in some cases already in Australia, on another visa. They may have spent years building their skills in the exact roles that you're struggling to fill. They may be mid-career professionals or long-term tradespeople who maybe they're experienced health workers, engineers, or other professionals who have proven experience and a strong commitment to their field. Many of them don't actually have access to things like the working holiday visas through no fault of their own. There's been no negotiation for their passport to be included on that list. They can't just show up in Australia and work casually and hope that it leads to something more. For them, the main way to come to Australia is actually through a structured process like the skilled migration or employer sponsorship. So that's where your opportunity lies. When you're prepared to consider sponsorship as part of your workforce strategy, you can access a pool. You can look at people who are actually skilled in the way that you need, not just present in the country on a particular visa. And if you have the right legal framework in place, you can do that in a way that is compliant, predictable, and aligned with your long-term planning. The try in this context is not a casual arrangement. It's a properly structured temporary sponsorship that still gives a minimum of a couple of years with the right person, long enough for the stability and continuity and return on investment. And then if you want them to stay on permanently, you've got further commitment. This is why some businesses who are more lucky, as it may seem, have fewer staffing dramas, have already looked to this and they've already got this as part of their strategy beyond just the local labour market. They've understood the migration system and how it was set up, and they've been willing to bring people based on their skill and suitability rather than just limiting themselves to whoever already holds a visa. So to recap, today's episode, we started by acknowledging what you're actually feeling on the ground, not just tired of recruitment, but tired of constantly trying to attract and retain good people in a market that doesn't seem to be giving you as much to work with, and that you keep relying on candidates who already hold work rights or on groups like working holiday makers, and how that can be risky if you haven't got proper planning for your workforce, especially when roles you're trying to fill are already recognised as being in national shortage. Then we talked about where the real talent sits in skilled migration. Many of those may not have a pathway to come to Australia without sponsorship. That's the reality. So if you need that talent, you need to look at sponsorship. The bottom line is the talent is out there. The question is whether your hiring approach is set up to see it. If today's episode made you maybe pause and rethink a little bit about where the future workforce is actually going to come from for your business, well, let's get some clarity on this and see if your business is actually set up for sponsorship. We've created a simple 60-second business eligibility check, and that helps you to understand at a high level if your business is likely to qualify for sponsorship. If you already have a particular situation or a candidate in mind, then you may want specific advice already, in which case book a consultation with us directly at www.solvi.com.au. Please don't wait until you're in crisis and then hope that there's a quick fix. Start to understand what is possible now so you can make better decisions for your workforce and your business. Thank you so much for joining me on this first episode of Mind the Gap Australia. I'm Rhea Favole, Principal Lawyer at Solvi Migration. Please do like, subscribe, and share. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode of Mind the Gap Australia.